Okay, so a shorter video today, but this is about installing a Perun Mosfet in an AUG. So you can see I've taken the AUG apart. There's plenty of videos on the web on how to do this, but you basically separate the upper from the lower. The plastic cover in the back, 2 screws, take that off, and then the gearbox is just really tight in there, and a little bit of banging and persuasion, and eventually the gearbox will come out complete. Obviously I've fully stripped this gearbox. It's been shimmed. It's got 12:1 gears in it, metal tooth piston, metal piston head, a double O-ring cylinder head, AUG nozzle, which I think is 23.4mm, but I'll tell you what, I will just confirm that with my calipers. 1 second. Nope, I was a couple of mil off. It's 25.4mm for the AUG, which is useful to know. I've left it with the standard nozzle for now, just so we don't have any issues with nozzle to hot rubber engagement and loss of seal, air seal, or any FPS problems. So yeah, so basically what you do for this is all the trigger mech, everything including all the mechanical bit, is completely binned off, and you just replace it with this trigger board here, which has 2 connectors, one for the programming board and one for the trigger board. Trigger board runs a wire all the way down to where the trigger mech is in the lower, which is here. I've not done it yet, but all this trigger bar mechanism, you just junk it all goes. We'll focus on that a little bit later in the video. And then there's also another board here which runs to the back of the rifle, and that's where you have the programming board. I'll show you that as well, just 1 second. Yep, so these are the extra bits that you get. That's part of the trigger assembly. These are the 2 wiring looms, and then you can see in there you've got the programming board, or control board as they call it, and the trigger board. So we'll go through installing all them, but first off, it's put that in the gearbox and bin off all the mechanical trigger completely, and then do whatever other upgrades you want to do in the gearbox while you go. So we'll get that back together. It's all been shimmed, and then we'll do the remaining bits. Okie doke, so gearbox is all back together. It's got an M100 spring in it, control board's ready, everything's shimmed nicely. This is obviously the original contacts, which were around here somewhere with all the rest of the mechanical bits. That's all gone. So we're going to swap the motor out, because this has got 12:1 gears in it now. We're going to put a high torque motor in. I'm actually going to use one from a TM SGR12 shotgun, because this motor's pretty high torque, to be fair. It's, people don't believe me with this, but it's true. The SGRs have effectively the equivalent of an M160 AUG spring in it, and you're like, oh, that's going to give you massive FPS. Well, it's not, because it's split down effectively three small cylinders to give you the 3 shots, so it gets you around about, standard TM 280 290 FPS from an M160 spring, and because it's split 3 ways, that's what you get. But you've got to use a pretty hefty spring, hence the stock motors in the TM SGRs and even the Simon ones are pretty high torque. So I'm going to put that in here. The reason why I've got this one is because a customer wanted an SGR12 with a warhead brushless motor in there, which really does improve the rate of fire in SGR12s. Anyway, so I'm going to fit this, and the beauty of AUG gearboxes is that we can actually test it outside of putting it all back into the gun, unlike an M4 or something like that. So we should be able to test it on the bench like this. Right, so we've got the motor assembled onto here. So this is the first time I've done this, so the interesting bit for me is this trigger board assembly here. And given that these gearboxes don't have a selector plate on them, I'm interested to see how that semi and full auto is implemented. So I think we'll start to take this apart, take all the trigger bar out, and then put the trigger board in and see how it goes. So first off, it's all these screws and just pull out the bar and all the mechanical assembly. So the Perun instructions are pretty vague really on how you get the trigger bar out. It's not that obvious. So picture says 1,000 words. So what you need to do is unscrew these 4 screws, pull out the safety switch, and then what you can see is if you lever it up, you'll see through there you've got access to a Phillips head screw. And if I can do it and move it properly, there we go. So there's one screw. And just pull this a bit further forward, a bit awkward. Try and do it. Oh, it's been a pain now. There's one, there's 2. 1, 2. So you can unscrew those and then you can start to remove the trigger bar. So yeah, as soon as those 2 screws come out, this just lifts lovely straight out. So that's the trigger comes out easily, but the trigger bar is still really awkward to get out, and that's because this feed mechanism from the mag to the gearbox also needs to come out. So there's 2 Phillips screws, there's one down there and one that I've already taken out there. So I'll take those out. This bit should then slide out and then the whole trigger bar should be removed quite easily. Okay, so with that unscrewed and taken out, which you get this, and be careful not to lose that spring. This bit can then be pulled out the back of the gearbox, he says. It's probably going to have to just believe me. Or at least slid backwards. And that should allow the trigger bar to be pulled out the front. I'm going to check that works first and then I'll show you. Yep, so the body takedown had to be taken out as well, which is there. This plastic bit, like I said, pulls out from the back, and then the whole trigger bar just drops out. Or it's just that the trigger assembly must be unscrewed and removed from the receiver. Be careful not to lose anything. Right, so now we've got this sorted. We're going to start fitting the trigger boards and everything and putting it all back together, and then we can at least test the gearbox outside of the gun and make sure it's actually working. So the trigger, all this assembly just goes. There we are. Let's get this sorted. So the trigger here with the spring, that just goes back in there. So we're going to screw that back in, and then we'll fit the trigger sensing board. Okay, so trigger board's here. These are the stock screws that come with this. They can hold it back in okay, but interestingly the screws that you get with the Perun are a lot longer. I think that's because you can install this somehow on a P90 as well. And interestingly, 2 of the 3 screws are steel, which stick to the magnet for the Hall effect thing, and 1 is aluminium that doesn't. So this has got a tiny dot on it there, which you line up with that arrow, and that solves the mystery of how we go to full auto. So that sits on there. Let's get that lined up properly. Struggling a bit right now, but you can see that will line up like that, and then semi, and then obviously all the way back to there, and it does full auto. There we go, that's it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this aluminium screw for here to stop the magnet getting attracted to it. But interestingly, they're all way too long, so they're all going to need dremeling and cutting to the right length, so I'm going to have to do that first. So we've got the aluminium screw in there now, and I was actually slightly wrong. There is a line in the casing there that should line up with that, and the dot should line up with the second Hall effect sensor. So I'm going to screw that on now, and I'm probably going to put a bit of thread lock on, so it's got 2 Phillips that side and then some 2 tiny grub screws that side to secure it. And so I'm going to put some thread lock on those. I'm going to use this stuff. So it's I can't remember which equivalent to Loctite it is, but it's not super strong, so it is breakable with a bit of force, whereas if you use the really tough stuff, you'll never get the screws out again. Right, so trigger control board's on, and you can see that must be interesting how the logic works actually, because it's constantly activating that semi sensor, so it must be when it goes from a logic high to low, when you break the circuit, that it fires, and then for the full auto it's the opposite way around. When it travels to the full auto, it goes from low to high probably and triggers full auto. So with that done, we can run the wire from there to the trigger board down there. I've got it connected to the motor there. We can put a LiPo on it and we can test to make sure everything's okay before we reassemble. Right, so I've got it all wired up. The trigger board's plugged in now and the control board, so I'm going to just put a 7.4 LiPo on here. Sorry, an 8.4 LiPo. There we go. Perun, difficult, these Deans. Perun does its thing, does its beep. So I'm hoping, yep. And I guess if you go all the way back and pull it hard, it's not happy. Not sure what's going on there. Let's take the battery off, put it on again. Oh, motor wires come off. Yeah, I only just put these on gently. I'll just put it on again. There we go. Okay, with the motor wires slightly more secure. Really nice trigger pull for semi. And then full auto. Nice. In fact, removal of all that clunky mechanical trigger bar makes the trigger really nice now. Cracking. So that's it all installed, so it now needs to all go back in the body of the gun. Okay, so for reassembly, we need to route this trigger control wire all the way down inside of here and into the back of here, and I'm going to have to connect it to the gearbox in a minute. This piece that we slid out earlier, I was wrong. We don't need to take out these screws, you can just slide it out. So that needs to go back in first before we put the gearbox in. So it goes in and slides down those rails there like that. If you can see that it slides onto some rails. I'll just get it located. Okay, so I've got the LiPo on, gearbox back in, and the programming board, there we are, screwed into the back. Top tip for these buttons, so the assembly for the upper and lower and the safety, is that's the spring clip there, the spring, and on this one it's sat in this side and this side. So if you separate the spring, I mean it comes apart really easily anyway from the actual main piece, then set the spring in first and then push the block in over the spring and guide it and push it through. It's a lot easier to get them in that way and for the spring to stay in place. So yeah, this is set up now. I can just test fire it, but it's seen it works. There we go. Pull to auto, although I've set it to 3-round bursts now. Job's a good one. So I'm going to fit a tight bore barrel, a few other bits and pieces, and then this should be good to go back to the customer.